We can speak now to the British Chamber of Commerce's Director General, David Frost. Mr. Frost, welcome. Thank you for talking to us this morning. These figures were widely flagged up in advance. What do you think of them? Are they in line with what you were expecting?
Well, we'd have to say, I think the growth figure of 2.6%, we still think is on the optimistic side. We're projecting about 2% next year. We always knew the 3.25 as projected by the last government was far too high. But as I say, even the 2.6 is going to have to work hard to achieve that.
Now, you've been obviously asking for cuts in the deficit. You've been looking at things like health and the ring-fencing of health and education as potential problems, and also pensions, public sector pensions. Are these things that you really want to see George Osborne getting to grips with on June the 22nd?
Well, I think the first thing is the emergency budget on the 22nd has got to get a very strong grip on public finance. We should not forget that all through the recession, the public sector has continued to recruit more staff. Pay rates are running at virtually 3 times the level of the private sector. And what we're saying is that there should be a public sector wage freeze in the total bill for the next 2 years. And there has to be a fundamental reform of public sector pensions. We have an apartheid in this country between those in the private sector and those in the public sector. For too long, governments have talked about reform of public sector pensions, but have not done anything. Now is the time to do something.
Now, what about looking at the tax situation? Because, of course, it looks like capital gains tax is going to be increased. We're also looking at potentially VAT being increased. The increases have to come somewhere, don't they? Well,
they do. I mean, we believe that to deal with this deficit, we should be in the order of 4 to 1. We should be dealing, the majority should be dealing with cutting public expenditure. But yes, we understand taxes have got to rise. But at the same time, if it's going to be business that drives this economy forward, it can't do it if it's burdened down with more tax. So we've got to see a complete rollback of the national insurance, the payroll tax that was proposed to be introduced. And we understand that an offset may well be an increase in VAT, a consumption tax. We need to rebalance the economy, and that's perhaps the best way to do it.
Now, there are a lot of people, though, who would say that that is not a fair tax, of course, because it goes right across the board. You think that actually VAT is a fairer tax than some other ones that could come in?
Well, it's easy to introduce, and it's relatively simple to introduce, and it can be done immediately. And secondly, we should not forget that over the last decade, what's driven the UK economy has been public sector expenditure and consumer debt. We need to move away and get the private sector to grow. We need to get exports to grow. We need to get business to expand. And as I say, if you tax business, you make it more expensive to do business, then that will not happen. So we believe that VAT would be the simplest way to do it.
Now, you've said already, of course, that it's very important that businesses expand. That's the growth, the engine that will drive the UK out of recession. How else could George Osborne be doing that in this budget? What could he be looking for that would help?
Well, I think the other thing, clearly, when it comes to cutting public expenditure, we don't want to see cuts in capital, in school building programmes, in road building programmes, in hospital building programmes, in digital. The success of the economy of the future is dependent upon that infrastructure investment, and also, of course, the private sector, the construction sector, is heavily dependent upon that as well. So we want to see that expenditure on capital maintained over the coming years.
Now, a number of economists that we've spoken to here at Bloomberg have been talking about the danger of a double-dip recession, that the cuts that have to be put in on the 22nd of June will, in fact, actually end up in a downward spiral. Are you concerned about that?
Well, we have to be concerned about a double dip, but we don't see that at the moment. Certainly, as I'm going around the country talking to businesses, they're extremely nervous and they're extremely fragile. But if the budget on the 22nd has measures in there to incentivise business growth, get people off the unemployment queues, then I think business will feel more confident to invest in the future. And once it starts to invest, then that'll drag the rest of the economy along. No,
we've seen a relatively weak pound recently, and yet exports haven't really gone up. Are you hoping that exports will go up? We're looking at places like Germany who've done very, very well out of the weaker euro.
Well, I think what's highlighted is the German powerhouse, as it were, is that they've had a relentless focus on exports, and of course they're benefiting from the growing expansion of the Far East, and not least China. What we've got to do over the coming years is to rebalance again away from our focus on Europe and get into some of these high growth markets on the other side of the globe, and that's going to take some effort, and there should hopefully be some measures in the budget to do that, because as long as the EU, if the Eurozone remains weak, then of course that's going to be difficult to export our way into.
Just before you go, you've obviously been writing and you've been in talks with George Osborne. What's your analysis of the coalition government so far?
I think it's holding well, particularly in those important parts of the Treasury and the Business Department. I get no sense of any divergence. They simply understand the deep-seated problems, one of cutting expenditure, but more importantly, how we get growth, and we're working closely with them.